All right. Welcome to this week's coaching call. Glad you guys are here. Glad to get to hang with each of you guys. All right. Give me just a second. All right. Get everything set up. Looks like we're looking good. All right. Okay. Awesome. All right. We will get rolling here. Welcome to April's live Q&A with the school community. I'm Blake Schwanee. I'm glad that you guys are here. Glad that we can talk some real estate a little bit. Just a um, quick feedback. If you got questions or issues signing in, or you got questions that you want to ask and you haven't submitted them to the blakeschwanee.com/ask. If you are in the Zoom, I'm going to prioritize the questions here. So just send them over in the chat and I'll get you taken care of. You got issues logging in, go over to the school community and comment on that post and we'll get you taken care of. As far as getting rolling, I'm Blake Schwanee. I know some of you guys have been following me for a while. Some of you guys is probably our first time interacting. I am a real estate investor and coach. I started out investing back when I had a W-2 and I was slaving away, making money for somebody else, and built up my portfolio. Ended up retiring at age 32. And now I focus on growing our portfolio, my family's portfolio, and teaching other people how to do it. And so yeah, my entire focus is to make fully autonomous real estate investors, so they don't have to depend on me. For heck, maybe down the road I want to become a clown or something like that. They'll still be able to invest in real estate. So with that, we will hop into questions. So you guys got questions, you send them over, and we'll get you taken care of. I've got some questions that I'm going to follow up with, that people that submitted their questions. One from George Walker. George asked, are you familiar with how leveraged buyout LBO loans use a turnkey business's assets as collateral on a loan that covers 5% of the loan? Sellers lending then cover another 5% of the loan, and the rest comes from an SBA 7A loan. Okay, George, what you're talking about is, or I guess I'll summarize what George is talking about. He's talking about using basically a high leverage purchase strategy called leverage buyout, where one lender funds the majority of the property, and then you get a second lender to fund the rest. So if you're putting 90% in with whether it's a seller finance or it's a hard money lender, and then somebody else finances the rest of it. Typically, LBOs are referred to more on the private equity side of things, because private equity will do this a lot, but it can be done other ways. I would not recommend this, George, from a real estate perspective, for a number of reasons. The primary of which being that SBA loans are restricted to primary residence generally. So if you have to be living in the property. So the only way this works is if you buy a property that, you've got a shop on bottom and you live on top, or you live in it somewhere, or you buy a quadplex and you're house hacking it. It's not scalable for real estate investing for cash flow purposes. So that all of the SBA loans are really targeted at the ones that you can use for real estate are targeted at primary residences. So that's one. The only time that I would use this is on a flip or a burr. And because you're going to be highly leveraged there anyway, but you're leveraged 100% loan to cost, but not 100% loan to value, meaning that the future value of the home, when you buy it, let's say you're all in at 100 and it's worth 150 when you're done. That means you're only 66% leveraged because it's going to be worth 150. Now you got to fix it up, but it's going to be worth 150. So you've got a lot of margin in the deal. In that case, it's great. If you're buying a property, say a turnkey property that's already in good shape, and you're putting 80% through a lender, they're giving you 80% through a lender. You got to bring 20% down, and then you're funding that 20% with a private lender or somebody else that will leverage you at 100%. Generally, right now, you're not seeing those cash flow. Even in cash flow markets, they're very, very thin, because you also have to pay the overhead on the private money lenders' money. And private money lenders, hard money lenders, gap lenders that do that, their money's expensive. That's one piece. The other piece is, even if the numbers did work, you've got to know that you're highly leveraged. So you're at 100% loan to value. So God forbid, if something happened and you had to get out of that property and sell it, you're going to take a loss. Because if you're selling a $100,000 property that you owe $100,000 on, when you sell it, you typically got about 10% in sales costs. Maybe you could get down to 7 because of the recent changes in how agents are getting paid. Maybe you only pay your agent and you can pay 7%, but still you're losing $7,000. So if you're going to do that, you need to, one, make sure you've got enough reserves to be able to cover that. And two, you've got enough cash flow to be able to, it's got to work from a cash flow perspective. But I would not recommend this as a strategy. It's just, one, it's overly complex. Simple is your friend. You want things to be simple. The simpler they are, if you could get 100% effectiveness and it's incredibly complex, or you could get 90% effectiveness and it is stupid simple, do stupid simple. Just do it. It's so much easier to scale. It's so much simpler. It exposes you to much less risk and puts you in a better position long term. Something like this, I think, I appreciate the creativity and the commitment and the, looking for other options. But I think there are much better options for coming out of pocket, no money. The Burr model being the best one, in my opinion. Burr model, flipping, coming out of pocket, no money. Something like this, I think, is overly complex. You'd have to live in the property. The numbers probably wouldn't work. So that's my feedback there. Hopefully that helps. Next question is Josh. Josh asks, I was wondering, for example, if I've got a cash flowing property of $400 in the event that taxes and insurance increases and leaves me with $100 cash flow or even negative cash flow, what would you suggest that I do? Okay, so we don't have enough information to know for sure because we don't know how much equity is in the home, but I'll give you a thought process on how to evaluate this. Essentially, you're asking the question, how can I best make my money work for me? How can the money that I have either in the property or that's coming from the property, how can I make that serve my goals the best? And in this case, I'm going to assume that when you say $400 a month cash flow, we're calculating that as all income minus all expenses, not vanity cash flow, which is rent minus mortgage, because there are a lot more both real and phantom expenses that you're going to experience. So hopefully you're already calculating it that way. But let's say you get down to $100 or maybe even negative cash flow. It depends on your goals and to a certain extent your risk tolerance. If your goals are hyper focused on cash flow, you should make a different decision than if you're split 50-50 cash flow and appreciation. If this property is in an appreciation market and you're fine leaving it in there knowing it's going to grow another 20% in 2 to 3 years, okay, great. Or it's going to double in value and it's a $400,000 property. You're going to make $500,000 in the next 8 years. That's fine. But first, it depends on your goals. So let's make an assumption and say that your goals are cash flow first, then moderate appreciation and price of entry. So we'll make that assumption. Then it just comes down to the numbers. This comes down to the numbers because if you're asking the question, how can I use what's at my disposal to make me the most amount of money possible or to insert my goal here, help me achieve this goal? If that goal is cash flow, then the question is, how can I use what I have to make the most cash flow? So if this property, let's say you've got $60,000 of equity in it. Let's say you owe 100 on it and it's worth 160. In that case, you might consider selling it. Depending on what the market's doing, if you can actually get 160 for it and you walk away with 60, I guess maybe you walk away with 50. You could take that 50 in a good cash flow market. You could buy 2, maybe 3 turnkey properties and make $300 a month each on them. Now you just turned $100 a month with some equity that's dead equity. You're not really using it into $900 a month. And you still have that equity because that money is going to be used as your down payment. Some of it will be chewed through, maybe, I don't know, the 8% of it or so will be chewed through in fees, originating a new loan and things like that. But generally speaking, you want to use that equity. Now, what you could do is if you had a stupid low rate and the property's value had just gone through the roof, you could do a wrap or you could sell it on a wrap or something like that. That would be a little bit more complex. But I don't recommend going into complex models until you've got the basics down. It's kind of like riding a bike. You don't want to be, hopping on a motorcycle if you don't know how to ride a bicycle, right? And you don't need to be trying to ride a bicycle if you don't know how to walk, right? We've got a 2.5-year-old son, and he's focused on the basics. He's learning fine motor skills and how to communicate and things like that. He doesn't need to be going to to do things that are outside of his skill set. And when he tries to do them, we protect him. Right? If he's crawling up a bit, he loves crawling up a big ladder in our backyard. Um, he only does that when mom and dad are around because he's not confident. He doesn't have the skills built out enough that we know for sure he's not going to fall off and break his arm. So you've got to have the residual skills, like the basic skills built out before you do something complex. So that's what I would say is if your goal is cash flow and you can use that money better to get more cash flow, you should. But great question, Josh. Boom. Okay. Erica, I think we answered this last time. Buying near college campuses. Yeah, we answered that last time. So check out March's Q&A. I know this came in. I want to say this came in maybe the day of, and we just didn't get to it last time. All right. Clinton asks, will buying an investment property affect my chance for a first-time home buyer loan from the FHA? There's a big misconception with FHA loans. Most people think that FHA stands for First Time Homeowners, whatever, Association, First Time Homeowners, something. The F and H do not stand for First Time Homeowners. It stands for Federal Housing Authority. The Federal Housing Authority, their goal in these FHA loans is to help people finance their primary residences. Typically, when you're applying for a loan, you've got a conventional loan first, which will give you the best terms. That's typically oriented toward people with better credit. With people with moderate credit, if they need something to help them, an FHA loan works really, really well. And so the first thing to note here is an FHA loan is not targeted at a first-time homeowner. It's a Federal Housing Authority loan that's designed to help people get into a primary residence. So you can only use it on a primary residence. Now you could house hack that house. So if it's a 4-bed, 2-bath, and you live in one room, you're a single guy, you rent out the other rooms to somebody else. Awesome. Or if it's you can do this up to a quadplex. You can use an FHA loan, 3.5% down. Heck, you can probably get some down payment assistance programs if you really want to come out of money, or out of pocket, no money. There's a lot of options there. You end up renting the other 3 units of the quadplex, and you get the one. So you could house hack and do that, but just to be clear, FHA loan stands for Federal Housing Authority, not First Time Home Buyers Association or First Time Home Buyers something. Now, you can only have, generally speaking, you can only have one FHA loan on your name at a time. So if you bought one house with an FHA loan and you're going to go buy a second house, you can't keep that one as a rental and still get an FHA on the next house. You would have to sell that house or refinance that house sometime during your ownership, and then you could get another FHA loan. It's kind of like a VA loan. VA loan, absolutely incredible to use, but you can really only have one at a time. So that's what I would say there. Now, specifically to your question, because that's the underlying information, your question of will getting an FHA loan be more difficult if I buy an investment property first? The answer is no, it will not. You can get multiple FHA loans. Those are separate things. They're more like conventional loans. You can use completely separate lending processes. There are multiple different types of money out there. I think a lot of people, whenever they start investing, they think, well, conventional loan, I got to come with 20% down, and okay, well, how many of these loans can I? Well, I can only get 10 of these loans on my name at any time. A conventional loan, you can, whether it's, FHA is easier to get than a conventional loan. And a conventional loan, you can only have 10 on your name. So how do you have these guys that have 8,000, 12,000 units? Well, they use different money. And instead of using conventional loan, they use commercial loans. So a conventional loan or conventional lending, they care about the borrower. These two lenders, they care about fundamentally different things. The conventional lenders, they care about the borrower. They care about you. And primarily the way that they measure that is your debt to income and your credit score. Your credit score is essentially an analog. It's their best metric for the risk of lending to you, your likelihood of paying them back. It's an imperfect measure, but here's where we are. It's a gravity issue. You can't argue with gravity. That's just what they do. And then the other is your DTI, your debt to income. So on a monthly basis, what is your debt that you owe divided by your income? So if you're bringing in $10,000 a month, that goes on bottom. Whatever your debt, your obligations are every month, that goes on top. So if you've got $3,000 of obligations in your rent, your credit card payments, your car, boat, whatever, That'd be 3,000 divided by 10, which is 30%. For a conventional loan, that number cannot be above 50%. And depending on lender, sometimes they'll go down to 43%, 42.5%, or 45%, but it cannot be above 50%. That's federally regulated. The federal government gets opinions on how to regulate or the requirements on those things because they insure Freddie Mae, Fannie Mac loans. They insure those loans. So what they've told those lenders is if all of these go belly up, we'll pay you back. You're fine. That's why they can be such low rates. So, but they care about you, the borrower. The other type of money is commercial money. They don't care about you. They care about the asset that's securing the loan. So they don't care about you as much. Some of them won't even ask for your DTI, or they won't even ask for your credit score. They won't run a credit check. They have no doc loans where you don't have to provide any documentation on yourself outside of the property. They care about the asset that's underlying the loan. And so how do they measure that? Well, it's similar to DTI in that it's one number over another, a very simple metric. It's called DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. So what they're measuring here is of the money coming in on the property, how much of that is chewed up through the debt service or the loan amount that I'm giving you. The way they measure that is income on top, or operational income on top, and then the debt, so your mortgage payment on bottom. So if your mortgage payment's $500 a month and you're bringing in $1,000 a month, that's a DSCR of 2.0. So then the question is, well, what's a good number? Like, I know what a good number is for DTI, or I know what a good number is for my credit score. What's a good number for DSCR? Typically, lenders want that to be above 1.1. There are some lenders that will go below that to 1.0, even over the last 2 years with rates where they're at. I've seen it drop as low as 0.9. But what that means is you've got a mortgage of $1,000 a month on bottom, and then you've got income on that property. You've got rent at $1,100 a month. 1,100 over 1,000 is 1.1. That's not a cash flowing property. That's not a good property. You're gonna end up losing $400 a month on this, $500 a month on that negative cash flow. So if you're investing in cash flow properties and you're doing it right, your DSCR should be 2.5 or higher almost every time. I've had lenders say, I don't even look at your DSCR anymore because it's always 3 or 2.75 or something crazy. That is the sweet spot there. So using commercial money allows you to fund your property without even have to worry about conventional loans or FHA loans or the conventional lending process. The reason I go into all of that is because these two money pools are different. They care about different things. So you don't have to use conventional money. And at some point, you would have to change strategy anyway, because once you get past 10 doors, you got to find another solution. I guess if you're married, your spouse could have 10 doors on their name, and technically you got 20 doors. Okay, great. But then you got to find new sources of money to be able to fund your deals. So you can use DSCR loans. Generally, those are under an LLC, but an LLC is easy to create. You find a registered agent and you just, you create that LLC for 15 minutes of your time and $300 out of pocket. Easy. It's easy to start a business. It's hard to make money with a business. So you can use that money. You can also use conventional money. You can get a conventional loan, another FHA loan. That's not going to stop you at all. So there are actually schools of thought out there. I don't know that I align with this explicitly, but there are schools of thought out there that some people say you should buy an investment property before you buy your primary residence, because you should be using cash flow from investments to be able to pay for your primary residence. Personally, I think buying a primary residence is a very good thing. The difference in wealth created for those that have a primary home, own their primary home, versus those that don't, is 44 times higher for those that created. Like, their net worth is 44 times higher on average for the people that own a primary home as opposed to those that don't own a primary home. So it's a massive distinction in net worth. And so I think the earlier you can buy a home, the better. Whether it's a primary home or it's a cash flowing property. Maybe you live in San Diego, or you live in New York, and buying a primary home is going to cost you an exorbitant. Is going to cost you $1 million, and you don't have that type of money. You can buy rentals. There are markets out there. You can buy it for $90,000. You can buy a gorgeous 3-bed, 1.5 bath, 1,400 square foot house that's in great shape that people would love to rent. It's just, you don't see that in your market. You say, those don't exist. You go look in Akron, Ohio, Birmingham, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, Dayton, Ohio, Indianapolis. I mean, they're all over the place. There's probably 100 cash flow markets in the United States that are like this. You just people when you live in a big city, you kind of get used to it, right? You just get used to the fact that house prices are $800,000 or they're $1.4 million for a 2 bed, 2 bath, 1,100 square foot house, right? Um, so Clinton, hopefully that helps answer your question on the FHA process. For those of you that are on the call, if you guys have a specific question, I'm happy to answer it. I'll prioritize your comments here in the call over the ones that have come in through the blakechoisnet.com/ask. And again, if anybody's got questions that they want to submit, go ahead and send them over to blakechoisnet.com/ask, and I'll get to those by the time we figure out. Awesome. Monique, you wanted to get back to DSCR. Monique, what's your question on DSCR? Send that over. You can send that either directly to me, I don't mind, or to everyone in the group, and I'll make sure that we get that answered. Are you required a down payment? This depends, but generally yes. So if it's a turnkey property, and Stan, I'll go check your questions too. If it's a turnkey property and it's in good shape, the lenders are going to give you 80% loan to value. Some lenders will go a little bit higher, maybe 85%, but generally 80% that's about standard. So you got to come up with the other 20%. So then you got to ask, well, how do I come up with the other 20%? Because the lender, they don't care about 20% down. They care about what comes out of their pocket, 80% loan to value. So you've got to ask, well, how do I create the other 20%? One would be showing up with money. If you want to show up with money and you don't have that money, you got to find a private money lender that will fund that gap. That could either be on debt, it could be an equity position, it could be a partnership, whatever. They could bring the money, you bring the deal, they fund the whole deal, and you split it, right? That's one way to do that. The other is to create the value in that property. One way to do that would be to buy way below market value. So let's say that you buy a property at one of my students, Jessica Hoffman, did this in Dayton, Ohio. She bought a duplex at 92 because she thought it was worth much more. She thought conservatively 140. So she used private money to buy it at 92 and immediately refinanced. Within 30 days, she was completely refinanced out and done. It appraised at 180. So she ended up walking away with $15,000 and had a cash flowing duplex that cash flowed $500 a month. But the reason she was able to do that is because she found something that was worth 180 and paid 92 for it. Now, the challenge here is those are hard to find. They're out there, but they're not just like roaming around easy for you to kind of pick, right? You've got to develop the skill and build the skill to be able to actually find those properties. And it's an exclusive skill. It's not some art that you have to, it's not some mystery. It's a skill that you can learn. So that's that. The one thing I would say there is if you're going to do that and you think, oh, I think it's worth more, you got to be rock solid, confident in your ARV estimation, your evaluation of the value of the property. So if you're going to do this, not only do you need to run comps and run them multiple times and then go through and try and convince yourself out of it, you need to get expert advice from an agent, a broker, someone in that market that knows that market. Heck, you could even have an appraisal done before you close on the property. Generally, these are harder to find if they're on the MLS or if they're even through a wholesaler. Enough people are going to see them that you're going to have more competition. So it's most likely that you're going to find properties like this when you're talking directly to the seller, whether that's through direct marketing or you're finding people listing their properties for rent because they're vacant and you just ask them, hey, can I buy your property? So all that to say, if you're using a DSCR on a turnkey property, generally you got to bring the money to the deal. So you could create that 20% by having somebody else, or I guess you could have somebody else fund it that's bringing it, or you could create that by buying it below market. You could also create it using the BRRRR model where you buy something distressed and then you fix it up and refinance out of it. But the DSCR loan, they'll fund you up to 80% of the value of the property. So you just got to find, well, how do I, if it's a long-term loan, you got to say, how do I fund the rest of it, essentially, right? So that's the answer to that. Monique, does that help answer your question? If you got anything else, let me know. And then Stan, I'll go check. Awesome. Great. I'm glad that worked. Stan, I'll go see Boom, boom. Stan, I'm not seeing anything. Hmm. You submit them today? Yeah, I don't see them. Let's do this. Stan, I'll just unmute you. You can ask me your question.
Honestly, I can't remember what the question was at the time.
No worries. No
Um,
worries.
so, but I do have a new question anyways. So, I actually just purchased a property subject to and renovated it, and I decided to just flip it because, and I know that's not normal that you get a property subject to with enough equity that you can do that, but I did, and uh, and it's just because even though I am a sub two student, um, I'm uneasy about holding a property subject to and dealing with all the hassle if a due on sale clause gets
Mhm,
called. I have everything in place, like it's already in there, so it can be converted to a lease option that mirrors the loan, all that kind
mhm.
of
Yeah.
stuff. So I can avoid it, but I just didn't really want to deal with the hassle. But then I was just thinking, um, well, crap, because I have so much equity, instead of just selling it, I could just keep it as a rental because it cash flows well. Um, and if a due on sale got called, I could just flip it into a DSCR loan.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's enough
Um,
equity in there, you can just go ahead and refinance it.
yeah, well,
You go ahead and refinance it. They give you 80% LTV and you're good to go.
yeah, yeah, I, I took it at the balance. I didn't pay the seller anything. They just signed it over to me. That was at 55 grand. I put 15 grand into it. So you're at 70. And then I have it on the market right now at 149. It'll
Oh, that's
probably
a good
sell at
deal.
140. It'll sell at 140 most likely.
Mhm.
Um, and that's kind of where the numbers are with the market the way it is right now. Um, and I was thinking I I really kind of wanted the cash more anyways because 2 years ago I got laid off of my job I had for 9 years. And so I just went into real estate investing full time. And from then till now, I've been surviving by flips and wholesales.
Yeah.
So I haven't really been able to focus too much on buy and hold.
Hmm.
I did pick one up in Birmingham, but I don't like the idea of also being uh, a landlord per se. Managing my own properties.
Hmm.
And so I picked that one up for 65, put another 15 into that one. Um, and uh, I'm renting that at 1600, but I sold it as a lease option, rent to own. So I did that one under contract at a purchase price of 160,000 with 1600 rent until they exercise that option. They're
Hmm.
planning on exercising that option this summer.
Hmm.
Um, the reason, which isn't again common, because usually they're not doing it that fast,
Right.
because we just did the lease option in February. Um, and the reason why I did that, the rent to own, is because then I put into the contract that they're responsible for anything up to $1,000. They're not, if the
Right.
toilet's clogged, they're not calling me,
Right. Yeah.
kind of stuff like that. Because Birmingham is a 4.5 hour drive
Hmm.
for me,
Yeah.
and I don't. And one of the biggest problems I have with what you're doing in your program, which I like, and I like the concept of it, but I've always struggled with the contractors, the people to use. Because general contractors you can't really use because they take all the profit. Um, and so you got to use, skilled handymen, kind of a scenario. And then hire people out for permitting stuff like if it's something that needs to be permitted for plumbing or HVAC or a roof. But otherwise, just a skilled handyman, um, I'm finding is what I use. And but finding those people, it's like trial and error, for two or three homes, or going through like two or three or four different crews of people before you find someone that you can trust and rely on, that's going to show up and do their work.
Yeah, my first contractor on my first property walked off with 12 grand. So I'm real familiar with that. So that's everybody's got a different appetite and desire, different goals. And so, what works, it seems like you got stuff working for you. Awesome.
Well, I have
I'd
stuff
say double
working,
down,
but I
do it.
want to, well, yeah, but at the end of the day, wholesaling and flipping, you just got a full-time job.
Hmm.
Um, and the only way to really get into somewhat passive income is to buy and hold.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm just trying to figure out how to transition into that because the my market is horrible for rental. I'm in the panhandle,
Hmm.
and the insurance is what kills
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And so the places that are going to be good places are well outside of my day trip,
Hmm.
to go out there and get back home.
Hmm.
Um, other than Alabama for the most part. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know where all the other places are because I just haven't researched it.
Hmm.
Um, because I want to stay within a 4 hour range, I guess.
Yeah. So I'd say, if your goal is passive income, you want cash flow. Right now you've got seems like a pretty good system built up for getting active income. Um, but if you want passive income and cash flow, you got a couple options. One is you can just do 20% down, keep flipping and wholesaling and make some money and just put 20% down. You don't have to deal with contractors. You don't have to deal with any of that. You find a cash flow market, 20% down, you're good to go. Heck, you don't even need to use an agent. You can self-represent and then get 3% back as your commission and credited to closing costs because you've got enough experience with the contract process and everything like that you don't need to worry about it. If you want to use an agent, fine. They can kind of simplify some of the headache there, but that is scalability issues, right? It's going to be a
Yeah.
lot harder to scale if you want to buy 10 doors in 1 year and your average process or your average price of a property is $100,000.
Well,
You're going to have
what
to make $200,000, put 200 grand
I'm
into
not doing that. That's not
that,
what I'm doing
right?
though. I'm not doing 20% down. I'm using a private money lender to purchase the property, and then I'm immediately refinancing it, um, and based on the new value. So I do have a lender that will, so I use the private money to purchase it, and then if I'm um, and I don't have any seasoning period with the one guy.
Hmm.
So I can do the refinance immediately. Matter of fact, the one I just purchased in Alabama and Alberta, um, I closed March 13th,
Hmm.
and I had the escrow agent send me the signed Alta while I was there at the title company. I forwarded it um, to the DSCR guy, and we just got the appraisal back. It came back lower than I expected, but it's still hitting the 80%. I thought we were going to hit 75%,
Hmm.
but it hit 80%. So I'm not having to come with any money out of pocket doing that. But I have confidence doing it because I already have guys that can do the work and, can do everything
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And
all
that's,
that.
that can make a lot of sense. If it's scalable and it meets your goals, awesome. The other way to do that is, you finding contractors is a skill. This is all stuff like just like finding a property manager and an agent that won't screw you over. That's a skill. And so there's a curation of your BS meter, which is one part. And then there's the how do I just skip the line and find the good ones? And the answer to that is referrals. So if you've got a network of other people that are in that market that have used contractors, get referrals from them. If you don't, it's never been easier to get those because there's Facebook groups for people in every market that are investing, and you just ask them, who are you using? And people, people can be a little bit more cagey, a little bit more protective with their contractors.
I
But
am.
even if you find people in that market that are active investors, in that Facebook group, I would message them one on one and say, hey, I saw that you're active in this group. Looks like you're an investor. I'm looking for a good contractor. You know anybody that's not going to steal my shoes? Somebody that I can trust. That's one way, is find somebody that's referred from somebody else. Even just post in the group and say, hey, I'm looking for a contractor. Who do you trust? Who's somebody good? Who would you recommend as another investor? And you'll have people say, hey, use me. I'm awesome. And that's fine, but you want someone that will recommend, because you're going to get one of three different types of responses. Either they're not going to respond because they don't care. They've used someone and they were just meh. And they didn't cause enough pain for them to reply and be like, I hate this guy. And then they didn't have a good enough experience for somebody to reply and say, hey, use them. Then you're going to have some people that are going to say, use this person, ABC Construction. They're awesome. I had a great experience. I use them on all of my properties. And then you'll have some that are like, don't use them. They're terrible. They stole all my money and
Yeah,
my
but
firstborn
it's
and all
their
that stuff.
friend or their wife.
Right. Yeah. So, and there's some discernment there. Then, I mean, you got to have an interview process, a standard interview process that you go through to make sure that you're good to go. And then the other is, you can't be 100%. So whenever you do use those contractors, you have to have protections in place. One protection in place is for the first, I'd say 3 properties, pay them with a credit card. Because if they try and screw you, you dispute that charge, and then the bank
Right.
deals with it, and they'll send the money back. And just knowing the bank process, it's a 99.9% chance you win that dispute, unless you're actively trying to sabotage them. You could be in the wrong, and 90% of the time you're going to win the dispute. And so what you need to be doing is say, first of all, I'm going to pay you in draws, and I want to pay with a credit card, because it's easier. Money moves faster. And they'll say it's going to be a 3% charge up fee. Awesome. You're paying 3% for insurance, essentially, for you
Right.
to be able to charge back. So then when they get done with the first draw, they say, all right, we're ready for the next draw. You say, perfect. I can't wait to send you money. Send me pictures, walkthrough video, all of this information, so I can make sure that what we decided in our first phase of the draw period is going to be done is actually done. So you've got to put those things in place so that you can push accountability to them. The other thing that I'd recommend is having third-party accountability on site. So not just your agent and not just the contractor sending you pictures, because a contractor can point the camera this way, and back there is a freaking train wreck, right? But this looks really pretty. And then they say, yeah, sure, we're ready for another distribution. You need to have a local, what I call project manager. And it's really, honestly, that's too formal of a title. It's just
Just boots
somebody
on the ground.
with an iPhone or a smartphone and feet that can walk around.
Yeah,
You
boots on
want
the
them
ground.
once a week, maybe twice a week, depending on how fast you're moving. Once a week to give you pictures and a walkthrough video. They don't even have to have real estate experience. They just need to walk through, take a full video, just walk around and just tell you what they're seeing. Oh, looks like we got some junk over here. Made some progress over here, and just talk out loud so that you've got more information. If you want to FaceTime them, you can do that too. That way you've got eyes in the property. And you can say, oh, go over there. What is that? The process that I use whenever I'm done with rehab and I'm handing off to my property manager is I get both of them in the same room at the property. Property manager's there, contractor's there, and I'm FaceTiming. I'm walking through. I'm saying, all right, and I'm adding it to our punch list. And at the end, I ask my property manager, all right, is this ready for you to lease? And the answer is always no, because we've got these punch list items, right? They got to move their tools out. They got to, blow out they're not going to mop and polish everything, but it needs to not have a bunch of tools and spare lumber in there. So they need to clean their stuff out, or we forgot this and we need to add a couple covers on outlets, whatever. Those punch list items, once those are done, I pay you your last draw. I cannot wait to give you money. I love paying you money. So your property manager says it's not done. Here are the things that need to be done. And then I say, all right, contractor, once this is done, go do it. All right. Once this is done, it goes over to the property manager. So there are things that you can put in place to protect yourself using contractors. I'm happy to pay the 5 or 10% that the general contractors make in order for them to manage the process, because it creates one point of accountability. So if they say, well, sorry, the plumbing, we had an extra, we have extra plumbing that needs to be done. Then I say, well, you quoted me for full install of this shower and this tub, correct? right? Well, yeah, but the plumber is more expensive. That is not on me. That's on you. This is not a change order. This is your mistake. So this got to come out of your margins. You got to find it, use spare material. I don't care how you do it, but that's on you. As opposed to when we say, well, hey, we found out there's something that we didn't plan for, on one of my properties early on. I got a big change order of, $4,500 change order from my contractor. And it's because when they went to go replace the floor, they got under the house and they saw that on a pier and beam foundation, one of the piers was just an old stump of a tree. And she said, I don't think that's going to get a permit approval. So I said,
It
well,
adds
yeah, I didn't have an
character.
inspection done on that. That one's on me. That is a change order because you didn't quote that. And so there's a lot of responsibility on you to be honest with the fact that, yeah, that's probably not on me, but then also to be strong and stand by yourself when you say, you said you would do that. So that's on you. And so it forces accountability in one spot. Now, if you want to act as that GC, that's fine. It just takes more time because you've got to go then source everybody. And for me, I want to buy my time back. I've got just the cutest kid who's 2.5 going on 3. We got a little boy on the way. My wife is awesome. I want to spend as much time with them as possible. And I'm happy spending an extra 5%, 10% for somebody else to do the actual GC process. And I want a local expert that can quote things out for me. So when I'm doing my due diligence, my deal analysis, I have an expert for every single number that's critical in the process. So one is you got purchase price. That number's not going to change. You're the expert there. So, but that depends on the other 3 numbers, which are rent, ARV, and rehab. So I have an expert for each of those. Rent is a property manager that literally that's what they spend their life doing is just leasing for other investors. So they know exactly what it's going to lease for. ARV is an agent. That's what they spend their time doing. And a contractor is I get a quote from them. Right. They're the rehab expert. They say this is how much it's going to cost. Sign a contract, scope of work, draw a schedule, boom, done. And then I have my downside protected. And so I love using contractors because it allows me to force the value north. It allows me to create the value in the property that we were talking about earlier with the DSCR loans. It allows me to create the value in the property so that I don't have to come out of pocket as much money. But if you got a good process that's scalable without having to use contractors or add additional complexity or risk to your process, I think that makes sense. Okay, list of DSCR lenders with no seasoning or super short seasoning for rate and term versus cash out. I have I tell you what, I'll make this available to you guys that's on the call. I'm not going to spam it out to everybody, but I have a lender vault that I'll make available to you. I'm going to give you the lender vault link right here. I'm going to send it over here in the chat. So if anybody's watching and they want to get access to this link, boom. There's just a smattering of information there. There's long-term lenders, there's fix and flip lenders, there's HELOC options, bridge loans, lines of credit. And one of the things that this solves, one of the problems that this solves is, lending can be a really difficult problem. In that there are anytime money's involved, you get scam artists. And that's another skill is figuring out how do I identify a scam? Like how do I identify someone that's trying to screw me and take my money? And so that's a skill as well. The problem is usually whenever you're building a skill, you build it by just doing it, right? How do you learn basketball? You go learn basketball because what's the downside of doing it? Well, maybe you look stupid, or maybe you trip and fall and the ball hits you in the face and you get a bloody, like your worst case scenario is not that bad. But if you just go and do this and go get $100,000 loan and you don't know how to spot a scam, someone could take a bunch of money from you. That hurts a lot more, right? So these lenders have been kind of sourced from a lot of the students in my private mastermind. I've used a bunch of them. We've included terms in here. One of the things in the long-term lending, we have a minimum loan amount. There's a bunch that are minimum loan amounts. Some of them have commented on the seasoning period. So you might just do a control F and search for some seasoning or the amount of days in that document to help you there. list of top 25 areas that are ideal for buying rentals. It depends on what your goals are. But if you're looking for cash flowing rentals, I used to put out a top 10 cash flow markets report each year. I haven't done that in the last few years just because I've got other priorities. But I'll give you some off the top of my head. I'm seeing great deals come out of Akron, Ohio right now, Birmingham, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi. Seen some really good deals coming out of Dayton, Ohio, Macon, Georgia, like bacon with an M, Montgomery, Alabama, Toledo, Ohio. Um, yeah, those are just a few off the top of my head that I see students moving real fast in. We've got a couple of guys investing in Akron. One of them went 0 to 8 doors in 90 days. He's now at 14 or 15 doors. Another went 0 to 10 doors and 0 to 12 doors in 4.5 months. Jordan, and then we've got one over in Birmingham, Dean. He quit his job in 4 months. He's full-time REI now. I think his goal was 12 doors in 12 months. He's at 8 months. He's at 12 doors already. So he's, passing that. So lots of really good deals out there. And especially, like, it's so interesting, the market. Like, you see a lot of people spooked with the what's going on with the S&P 500 and the stock market and everything like that. It's interesting to see how much mass psychology influences all that stuff, because it makes you think, oh, there's not any good deals, or it's such a scarcity. There are more deals out there than you could possibly imagine. And for people that think like, oh, there's not much money out there, there is so much money. There's so much private money out there. It's obscene. I mean, it's just absolutely bonkers. I talked to a guy who's putting together a private equity fund who's considering allocating $2 million to lending to my students. And he's just one guy. There's just so much money out there. Most people, the biggest challenge with private money lending is most people don't know what private lending is. And so they might have the money to be able to do it, but they don't actually know what it is. And that conversation with that private equity guy, he said, yeah, I just talked to guys that have tons and tons of money. He used to be in the private equity space working at W2. So he knows a bunch of people that are super high net worth. And when I tell them about this, they're like, what is it? Why don't people do this? Well, they just don't know about it. It just, you can make 20% on your money and have it reliquid in 4 months. So hopefully that gives you an answer to your question, Stan. Joel, you play in the multifamily space? If so, thoughts for beginners, sub 20 units. In Ohio, great pricing, but not landlord friendly. Okay. So Joel, what I would say here is, for beginners, my recommendation is, it comes from a place of risk protection, like how much risk is, and then Murugesh, I'll get over to you. It comes from a place of risk protection. Let's say you could start with, to use extremes, you could start with a single family who is it's $100,000 property, right? You could start there, or you could start with 100-unit property that's $20 million purchase price. Let's say, because it's your first property, let's assume you screwed up 10%. I think that's fair. You screwed up 10% because you don't know what you're doing. If you do that on a $20 million property, you're bankrupt, right? If you do that on a single family home, it's $10,000. No one wants to donate $10,000 to the School of Hard Knocks, but at least you live and can still eat, right? And so it's a matter of risk protection. So, and the other component is, from a practical standpoint, we're talking about building skills here. It's not just like I mentioned earlier, it's not some mystical thing. You're building a skill. And so, to use the bike analogy, you don't want to hop on a Harley before you know how to ride a balance bike, right? Right. And you want to make sure that you have the requisite skills to be able to do that. Because if you can't manage one single family home and analyze it to the point where you're cash flowing, or it's meeting your goals, or it's doing what you think that it was going to do, and you manage it in such that it continues to do that, what do you think is going to happen with a $20 million property? You know what I mean? Like, you just don't have the skills to be able to do that. You could get there, but it's kind of like almost like asking, like, hey, I want to bench 315. Does that mean just go lay down on a bench, put 315 on, and try and no? You're probably gonna hurt yourself. You're definitely gonna tweak it. Well, if you're I've been feeling the getting older process lately. So I'm definitely gonna tweak something if I go try and slap 600 pounds on the bench instead of working up to it. So that now what that's not to say is don't go big, or don't set wild goals that people in your life think are ridiculous. You should do that, but you should do it in a wise way that doesn't unreasonably or unnecessarily expose yourself or your family. And so my recommendation is start with something that's risk protected, like a single family home. Then maybe get a duplex. Like, what's the difference between a single family and a duplex from an analysis and management process? Basically nothing, right? And then what's the difference between a duplex and a quadplex? Basically nothing. Difference between a quadplex and an eightplex? Once you get over 5 units, some funding processes change, but not really a whole lot. All right. And then the difference between 8 and 16, almost nothing. Smaller than the difference between 4 and 8. But then you're at 80 doors, or you're a millionaire in a year or 2 years. So that's why I recommend that. Now the multifamily space, it's really good. There are great things about the multifamily space. There are benefits and trade-offs of multifamily versus single family. Multifamily, one of the things I love about multifamily is one, you can divide out your expenses per unit. So let's say you got a roof issue, right? You can divide that out over 20 units if it's a 20-unit property. You can also shield yourself from vacancy, right? That on a 20 unit, if you have 1 unit vacant, that's better than a single family where 100% of your property is vacant if someone moves, right? But the thing I love the most is you can force the value of the property north just by operating it better. If you bought a property that was at 50% occupancy, economic occupancy, whether there's butts and seats or not, they're not paying it. It doesn't even matter. All right. 50% occupancy. And just because you actually operate it better, meaning the person owning it inherited it from his dad and he's collecting it. I've seen this. He's collecting rent by hand. He's writing it down on his own personal ledger with a pencil, right? And like all the receipts, like he's bartering for it's not systematized. His interview process is in person. It's slow, like it's just very, very old school. You come in and all you do is you sign it. You have a website that, okay, you pay here. Heck, you can even use your credit card to pay for your rent, or you can use, you just make it easy on them. First rule of business, make it easy for people that want to give you money to give you money. Make it easy. So you set up that type of stuff, and then you get to 90% occupancy, 100% occupancy, you'll almost double the value of the home. You can force it, or of the asset. That's really beautiful. The thing that I love about single family is they're much more liquid. Meaning, what's the market for someone buying a 20 unit? A lot less people than for somebody buying a single family home, right? Because there are people that, the other thing that I really like is those people buying a single family home tend to have more emotion involved in their decision making, which allows for a little bit more influence on the price. If they say, golly, this is my dream home, I can just see the kids growing old over there. I can just see, oh man, we could do this over here. Or my sister lives down the street. Oh, this is perfect. They might overpay for it. Whereas a 20 unit or a 40 unit, you're working with investors and they work with math. And that's all that it is, So multifamily, I think, is fantastic. I think the best way to get into it is to scale into it so that you minimize your risk exposure and you learn the basics. You learn the pillars that you need. And then whenever let's say you move from a 4 to an 8 unit, there are a few things that change. If you try and do all of them at the same time, it's going to be drinking out of a fire hydrant. It's going to be a lot. But instead, if you already know 95% of the process, then you can hyper focus on the 5% that changes. The due diligence process, maybe the financing, the appraisal process. Like you can really focus on those things, master them, and then you do the same thing whenever you go from 8 to 16. So, but that's a great question. All right, Murugesh, coming over to you. Of
Thanks, Blake. Appreciate it.
course. How can I help?
So I reached out to you regarding that, fire damage property in Sherman, and finally decided not to move into it because I could not imagine myself doing a first flip on a fire damage property. Just felt like I was taking too much risk. Luckily, I got in touch with a few contractors who gave me the numbers, right? But I still didn't feel like I covered all the blind spots, so just decided not to move forward. But the good news is I've got a contract on a single family home in a neighborhood that I'm familiar with in Fort Worth, and trying to close on it in the coming days. So
that's great. Congratulations.
yeah.
I think a lot of people
Thank
get
you.
really discouraged whenever they find a deal, especially if it's their first deal. They find a deal and they either back out of it or the deal falls apart or something like that. But the reality is when you get under contract with something, it helps you focus. And so you're like, well, shoot, I got to find a contractor. Boom. And then you just focus on that. You find one. Like it's wild how quickly you can move if you have to. Right. And so you learned a ton, and then it falls out of contract, and that's fine. You back out and you say, oh, that's a loss, but really it's not. I mean, you made a lot of progress, learned a bunch of stuff that you don't have to relearn. Now, when you're under contract on this one, you only have to learn new things.
Absolutely. You hit it on the nail, because it was just like I called this one guy in Dallas, and he happens to be the insulation guy. So this house has foam insulation. And apparently, when you have foam insulation, and it had a lightning strike, right? So that's how the fire happened. So apparently, to take off all that foam insulation and then put in a new HVAC system, that HVAC system has to be a high efficiency unit, and that costs more. And there's only a few people in the whole Metroplex who do that kind of work. And he gives me a name for this guy who does that kind of work. And then he gives me another contractor's number and says, like, hey, talk to Josh. He can help you come up with a total number for coming up with an estimate. So it's all these contacts, that and the amount of information that I gathered on that one morning. I was like, it's all like God sent, it's like connecting all these dots. But
yeah, it's like if you jump out of an airplane without a parachute built, but you've got all access to all the stuff, like you can work fast.
Yeah. So that was a blessing. And then I chatted with you, and then you said, you said we'll connect. So, I mean, I felt like I learned a lot. And like you said, I didn't close on the deal. It's in Sherman, right, which is booming like crazy. But I'm like, okay, if you lose this deal, that's fine. Just wait for the next deal that comes through.
More than enough deals out there. People, you can get in a lot of danger by convincing yourself there aren't any good deals out there, because then you'll take a deal that sucks and say, well, this is the only one that I'll ever be able to, and then you overpay for it and you're kicking yourself down the road. When if you would just be patient, be vigilant, but be patient to find the right one and define your success criteria ahead of time, you're gonna be fine. There's more than enough deals out there.
Right. And then my wife always tells me, don't get emotionally attached with anything, right? It's one of these things. It's like, if it doesn't happen, right, it's happening for a reason why it didn't happen. So just move on to the next one and just don't, hang yourself on it. So even this one deal that I'm talking about, I have the contract, and they tell me they're waiting on some sort of a lien that has to be released before they can close the title. And they can't give me a date on it, on when it'll be. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll just keep following up.
Well, and the nice part about that is if they can't provide clear title, you can get all your EMD back, right? If you cancel the contract, you're not getting your EMD back. But if they cancel the contract or they don't fulfill their contract, you could back out if you wanted to. But usually those types of lien, like I had a property where we had some title issues, and it delayed a few months, and it came down to the fact that the property was inherited. And then we'll probably have to wrap up here in just a moment. I'm gonna go have lunch with my wife, my little boy. But there were 3 kids that inherited it, and 2 of them wanted to sell it. The other one was in jail, and they hadn't talked to him. They just made the decision because he's been in prison for a while. And so they're like, well, we need his signature. So they had to he's out of state, like they have to actually go make this happen, not just convince him, but then get his signature, get a power of attorney, like all of that stuff. And so that took a while. And so, there can be legitimate reasons why things slow down, even though they're uncommon.
Right. So quick question. Would you have any information on these private lending, like who to talk to, what to
Yeah,
ask for?
a private
Yeah.
lender, the private lender is different than a hard money lender. Hard money
Mm-hmm.
lender, think of like as an institution, like a mini bank.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of hard money. What makes it confusing is there's a lot of hard money lenders out there that brand themselves as a private lender, and they're not really a private lender. A private lender is an individual with their own money that
Mm-hmm.
manages their own money. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason that's important is because speed of money is very valuable. You find a wholesaler that says, I need to close in 5 days, and you say,
Mm-hmm.
I got the cash, I can close in 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go to the front of the line as opposed to
Right.
somebody that's like, I need 60 days to close because I'm using my local bank and like all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
finding those people, you just have to know where to look. You got to know the right people, whatnot. I'm actually going to put together, and I can put you on, if you will message me your email. I'm not sure if I got, message me your email if you're interested. I'm putting together a private money lending challenge where I'm going to teach people how to raise private money because there is so much money out there. It's wild.
Yeah.
I don't give out the private lending contacts that I have because I've committed those to my students. So the private money lending that I've connected or that I've collected, it all goes to my my students. We have a private money lending channel. They submit their deal, and then the private money lenders say, "Hey, I'll fund that deal." But I can teach you how to find your own money, and that's honestly that's more valuable than anything. So,
right.
So I'll be doing that here soon. Well, I'm hoping to be able to do it before we've got our baby boy, who shows up in probably late May. So maybe here in I don't know 3-4 weeks or so.
All the best.
But I'm going to do it. It's going to be 4 days, probably about an hour each day. We're going to go through exactly how to find the people, what you're looking for, what your pitch is. I'm going to give you scripts. I'm going to, like a full walkthrough that, my goal is to pair some people up too, so that you can do some role playing and stuff like that and practice together. Cause as much as people hate role playing, the bummer is it's just really effective. Like when you get asked a question and you kind of have, your brain has to figure out, how do I get through this without looking like an idiot? Then when you get to the other side, that question's easy again. And most of the time, the hard questions are not going to be asked by a private money lender. You're really teaching them. So, but yeah, I'll put you, if you send me your email, I'll put you on that list to make sure that you get notified. Cause I can't do everybody coming to the,
right. Absolutely.
My approach is not volume. I want people to learn. And what that means is generally it needs to be a smaller group. So it'll be capped, but, yeah. So send me your email and we'll get that taken care of.
Okay. Perfect. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Awesome.
And,
of course.
Wishing you a wonderful time with the new baby coming up.
Appreciate it. Yeah. We've lost 2 babies in the last 18 months. And so we're just so grateful that we get to hold this one and, get to, see my little boy be a big brother. I know he's going to be an awesome big brother. And so we're just floored. We're excited to meet little Parker.
Awesome.
Parker.
We'll keep praying for you. And your family.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, we got to go ahead and wrap up. I'll answer, I'm going to capture these questions. Stan, just a short answer. I love Section 8. Probably 60% of my doors are Section 8. You can find out exactly what the rents are. It's really easy to increase rent. And sometimes you can get more money for your property than the market would really provide. Joel, we can talk about cost seg next time. Stan, massive marketing team plays. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've got students investing in Akron, a bunch of different markets, basically all the ones that I mentioned earlier. So if you find deals in there, send them over to me. I'll send them to my students and, we'll get you taken care of. Squatters, invest in a landlord friendly state, a place that allows you to actually do what's reasonable instead of let them sit in your home for 3 years because they said that they live there. But that's the short answer. But I'll copy these questions and put them down for our next Q&A. I've been toying around in my head with the idea of doing these Q&As once every 2 weeks, just to get people a little bit more feedback and everything like that. But we'll see how much time I'm able to make happen. So I'm going to copy these, add them to our list, and we'll talk through them next time. If you guys have additional questions, send them over in the community, in school, get you some answers. And as always, happy investing. See you guys next time.
Thank you.